Okay, it's recording. Let's go.
I think your questions are first last though.
If those are in the way, you can just
Alright, start them off. Do we know when and where you were born?
I was born here in Southern California, over the San Fernando Valley. Actually, I was born in Santa Monica in 1951. Yeah.
And do you have any any relatives in the military, or any other parents? Or...
My dad served in the Army Air Corps in World War II. My brother served in the Air Force during Vietnam, but he never went to Vietnam. My daughter is a major currently serving in the Pentagon.
Oh, that's cool.
My son-in-law is a captain who is going to Georgetown University right now, and then will serve in the Pentagon. My son is a captain in the Army Reserve. He's been on 4 combat tours in the Middle East. My wife served with the California National Guard as a warrant officer. The whole family is all military.
That's cool. That's cool. And what were you doing before the military? Did you have any other interests before going in the military, or did you just decide to?
I was in college with the full intention of joining the military. That was a passion that drove my college career and my college activities. I was in ROTC, and I intended to join the military.
Alright, so you enlisted after college?
Well, officers don't enlist. Officers go through a program and are commissioned. And the 3 programs are, you go to West Point, which is a college program to go ahead and be commissioned in the Army. You take ROTC in a civilian college, and at the completion of your ROTC and you receive your degree, then you are commissioned. Or you can enlist and you go to OCS, in which you will then again be commissioned. So yeah, after I graduated college, I graduated ROTC and I was commissioned in the Army as a second lieutenant.
Why did you decide to choose the Army as your career?
I actually wanted to join the Navy originally. I like their uniforms better. But I have several vision deficiencies that disqualified me to be a naval officer. I didn't have the acuity and the sight that they required. I couldn't be in the Air Force for the same reason. In order to be a Marine officer, you had to go through the Navy program, so that knocked the Marine Corps out, which left only the Army. And actually, I thought it was a good decision. Looking back on it.
So once you're commissioned for the Army, did you go to like a training camp or something like that?
After you've gone through your basic officer training, which is your ROTC, and you are commissioned as second lieutenant, your first assignment is to go through additional professional officer training. I went to the signal officer basic course. I was a communications officer. So you go, and it is just about 6 months. And you learn how to be a junior officer within your branch. My branch being communications. I learned a bunch of basic communications, terminology, the equipment, and how to employ that, how to lead soldiers. And after that 6 months, then you get assigned to your first unit.
Did you have any like specialized training for the Army professionally?
For communications, I went through a couple of other courses. What was that? The Comm Center Officers course would teach you how to run a communications center, which has a lot of what would be today digital communications going through it. Back then, it was teletype communications. I don't even know if you guys have any connection to teletype, but that's how we used to go ahead and send messages, and it would print out automatically on a teletype, and you'd have a sheet of paper you'd rip off, and then you'd ship it to the person who's supposed to have that. So I received some of that training. I did go to jump school, so I was airborne qualified, a paratrooper. So those are a few things I did initially. Now, since that time, I've had a lot more training on different subject areas.
Was it hard to adapt to military life after college and joining the military?
I did not find it difficult. I was an officer, so I didn't have to live in barracks. I immediately got married, so my wife went with me wherever we were assigned. We were authorized housing off of the military installation, so we either had a house or we qualified for housing, which was an individual house on the military installation. So the transition, as far as my personal life was concerned, was not particularly difficult. Business-wise, yes, it was, because you go from being a college student to being a leader. My initial leading was I had a 35-man platoon, in which I was one of the youngest guys in the platoon. And I'm expected to lead them all. And I had sergeants who had been in the service for many years, multiple combat tours in Vietnam, that I'm the leader. They know so much more than I did. It was a joke. So you learn to adjust and adapt to those things. You allow people to utilize their knowledge and their experience to teach you how to do your job. And with that, and my first assignment was overseas. I went to Korea. In 1974, it was a much different place, a real cultural change. My wife was Chinese, so she had grown up in Hong Kong, so she was much more used to the Asian lifestyle in Asia. The Asian lifestyle here in the United States is nothing like the Asian lifestyle in Asia. Totally different thing.
In periods of peace, how often, like how many hours a day would you say you work?
Normally, if there's not a conflict somewhere, you're going to end up reporting for duty at about 7 in the morning. You do PT for about 45 minutes. Then you're off for about another 45 minutes to an hour, in which you go home and you get your breakfast and you do your personal hygiene, take your shower, get in your uniform, and report back to duty sometime before 9 o'clock. And you work from 9 o'clock until about 5 o'clock in the afternoon, doing routine activities, training, classes, doing maintenance, accounting for property, taking care of personnel problems. At 5 o'clock, you generally wrap it up and head home, get something to eat, get ready to do it again the next day. Now, there are some jobs that take longer. If you're the aide to a general, you're going to be in earlier, you're going to work a little later, but it's pretty much 7 to 5 operation. But the other thing to understand about the military is the military is paid 7 days a week. And the military is obligated to work 7 days a week if it requires it. Because you're in peacetime or you're in a stateside billet, you generally work 5 days. But if there's something that has to be done on a Saturday or Sunday, you're coming in and working. If we go to a wartime footing, you're likely to be working 7 days a week. Maybe you get half an afternoon off on a Sunday. A lot of people they want to go to church. You want to go to church because you always get a couple hours in the morning to go ahead and get a break and go to church and get some nectar. So it all depends on what we call the op tempo, the operational tempo.
And how would you say in periods of war, like were you working how many hours a day?
I went to 2 combat areas during wartime. One was Desert Storm, and generally we were probably in somewhere around 8 in the morning, working until about 6 at night. And Desert Storm was a lot of preparation, the war, and in 4 days it was done. So had it gone longer than that, there's always the potential that once combat operations really kicked in on the ground, we would have been working 14, 15 hours a day. When I went to Operation Iraqi Freedom, I worked for General Petraeus in the headquarters. And I generally got in around 8 in the morning and didn't go home until 8 or 9 at night. So it was 12, 13, sometimes 14 hours a day. And you're in a situation because that's all there is to do. You can go to the gym, you can go eat, you can go to church on Sunday, but there's not much else to do unless you get a USO show. We had Toby Keith come in and do a show one Saturday. So a lot of the compound took off and went on over. They set up chairs and we did the show. But that's very rare. Mostly it's work, eat, sleep, Go to the gym.
So you mentioned you served in Asia?
Yeah, served in Korea for 2 years.
Yeah. So you said it was different. How exactly was it different? Serving there versus serving here?
Well, if you're in the United States, you're in your own culture. You know how to go ahead and deal with things like the traffic, with the shopping, with going to the mall or going to the supermarket. You go over to Korea, there are no supermarkets. You have a little store that's going to sell you a certain item. Now, we had the opportunity, because we were in the military, we could go on base and go to what we call a commissary, which is a supermarket. Not nearly to the level of a Pavilions or a Vons, but it provided American goods that you could buy. There is the PX, the Post Exchange, which is kind of like, at that time, it was a small Target. Had American goods, you could go. But there was a period of time there where I couldn't get razor blades for 6 weeks. They were just out of razor blades. Your wife may not be able to get makeup that she normally uses. You won't be able to get Coca-Cola. There are things that are better procured on the economy, out in the Korean marketplace. The traffic was different. The food was different. You don't go out to a hamburger joint. There were none. There were no McDonald's. There were no Kentucky Fried Chicken. The first time we saw McDonald's in a year was when we went to Hong Kong for a visit. They had a McDonald's. And that was, wow, let's go. I don't even like McDonald's. But let's go to McDonald's because it's an American fast food place. We haven't seen one in all of that time. So many, many cultural differences, the way the language, how people react to things. So it was a change. My wife was more used to that because she had grown up in Hong Kong. But it was an easy transition. I came to like Korea very, very much. Only enough to get around. From some hamnida, a few other little phrases. Hello, goodbye, turn left, turn right. I want to go downtown. That was 40 years ago. I don't remember much of that. I haven't used it since I left. I did go back to Korea about 3 years ago. My daughter got assigned to Korea. And we went to visit her, and she lived about less than a mile from where we lived in an apartment. But things have moved so far forward in Korea that the modern westernized apartment building that my wife and I lived in, which was the place to be in 1974, had been torn down and replaced by a more modern building that was just far beyond anything we could imagine. So it was a completely different, changed environment.
So when you were serving, was there any?
So when you were serving in Korea, that was different than when you were serving in Operation Iraqi Freedom. Because you weren't confined to the base in Korea. It was like a safe place.
Korea was in peacetime. There was no conflict going on. All of South Korea was open to travel. I had my wife there. She came on over. We lived on the economy, which means we had an apartment out in town. We could get taxis and go downtown. I shipped a car over. I was authorized a car. I had my car in Korea. I could drive it any place I wanted to go. So there were no restrictions. The only restriction at the time in Korea was they had a midnight curfew. And that was Korea for all of Korea. So after midnight, no one could be out on the streets. And that was in order to keep track on North Korean terrorism that may come down through the DMZ. But very few events of that. I ran communications up and down the Korean Peninsula. And I had communications sites that were spotted all along the hilltops. And I would go out and visit the sites and check to make sure that things were going well and ensure that the communications control center was tracking and monitoring everything. So it was not a difficult existence. My wife ended up being a secretary for one of the military offices in the headquarters. So it was, as far as our freedom and existence, was very much like the United States would have been, except for the cultural to Iraq, I'd been in the Army for 26 years. So I was pretty much attuned to all of the different environments. In Iraq, you were locked on the compound. If you went off the compound, it was in a convoy with gun trucks. You were armed to the teeth. Anytime I left the compound, I was carrying a 9mm, and I'd go in and get an M4 or an M16 and pack in probably 100 rounds of ammunition. And I didn't leave the compound all that often. I left maybe 4 or 5 times in the year that I was there to go do other business or other missions. You were always a target if you were off the compound. One of the incidences you had is if you are moving on an Iraqi road, you don't stop. So we're running down the Iraqi road. I was in a convoy with a 2-star general. I was one of his staff. So I was going with him over from the headquarters area at Camp Victory into the green zone into downtown Baghdad. And we're running down a highway and suddenly traffic stops. And our driver, he ain't stopping. He weaves through the traffic, crosses over the median, hits the other side of the highway and is going into oncoming traffic. Oncoming traffic getting out of the way as our little convoy is running down there until traffic on that side stops. Then he goes back over into the median and on the other side where we run into an MP checkpoint, US MPs. And they were stopping everybody. We pulled over, stopped because we were now in a controlled area and found out there was an IED just up the road and they had stopped traffic to clear the IED. So those are some of the differences that you have. You get incoming. So we might be sitting out here having lunch outside of the palace and you'll hear klaxons start going off and rocket attacks coming in. So you go hit the ground someplace and you get down low. And that could happen at any time because they were lobbing rockets into the compounds. They'd hit the wall. You'd hear the machine guns going off. I did not go outside of the compound on any mission that was a specific combat mission. I was mostly escorting somebody to go someplace. So I didn't get any direct combat. But that was why there was no recreation beyond going to a Toby Keith concert or going to the gym. The lawyers and the doctors set up some putting and driving greens. So they'd set a little piece of AstroTurf, put a tee there, a driving tee, and you'd go up and drive golf balls into the lake. That was recreation. Night, maybe somebody had a video, would throw it into a computer and watch a movie. But that was much more restricted. There was no drinking. When I was in Korea, you were overseas. You were in a more civilian environment. You could drink. You could go to the officers' club and go drink. There was an officers' club. There was an NCO club. You could have dinner in the restaurants. In Iraq, there were some fast food places. You could go get a hamburger over by the PX and a fast food, but that was about it. You went to the dining facility. That's where you got your food. There was no alcohol. So general orders number 1, even if it was available, you were not allowed to drink. So we all smoked cigars all the time. So take a cigar break in the afternoon, and then you get a group of people up on a veranda like this, smoke a cigar and watch Baghdad blow up. So that's much the difference between being in a combat environment and being in a peacetime environment overseas, in a garrison type environment. And I've had other overseas garrison environments. I served in Belgium and Germany. I served in Israel and Damascus, Syria. So I've been there, and I had the other wartime environments in Desert Storm. But that was in Saudi Arabia, which was a friendly country, which we still had the ability to get off the compound and to move about the country relatively freely. The only thing we were watching for then were any terrorist attacks that may occur along the highways. But a couple of us could get out and get a vehicle and go drive 200 miles down the road and go to another compound and see what was going on. So a little different there too.
How do you stay in touch with your family and friends while you were overseas?
When I was in Korea overseas, in that peacetime civilian environment, you could go ahead and get access through certain telephones on the compound. You go ahead and apply for a time to go ahead and make a phone call. I could call my dad and talk to him, or Alice would call her parents. Since my wife was with me, I didn't have a whole great need to talk to people a lot. So I talked to my wife every day. In Belgium, Germany, it was peacetime in a very built-up infrastructure, so it was easy to go ahead and call an overseas operator, get a long-distance call the United States. It cost a little bit. In Desert Storm, when I was over there for 3 months, I would have to find a phone that had international access. We were in Saudi Arabia in Riyadh, and I did. I found one phone that had international access, and I could dial a number, and I could go dial my wife and talk to her. And I would talk to her maybe once every couple of weeks, let her know that everything was okay, find out if I could write a check in the PX because I needed to buy something. I didn't have any idea how much money we had. She has control of that. And when I was in Operation Iraqi Freedom in Baghdad, because of my position, I was given a cell phone. So I could keep in touch within the compound and within the local area with certain people I had to coordinate with. Come to find out that that cell phone, I looked at it, and it had an area code on the number. And the area code was New York. And I checked that out and found out that I could call any number in the United States because I had a U.S. area code. And I don't know how it worked, but I never got a bill. So I didn't use it on a routine basis. If I had a serious problem or something was going on that might worry my wife, I would give her a call, give her a heads up. I happened to be sitting in Baghdad one day watching the news on my computer. This was in 2007, September of 2007. You probably were all too young to remember the massive fires that were burning all around Southern California. It was so bad that every way in and out of Los Angeles was blocked. There was a fire on the 101, there was a fire on the 15, there was a fire on the 5, and they essentially, you couldn't get into and out of the city because there were so many fires burning. And I was watching, and they showed a picture of a fire burning, and I noticed that there was my house. So I called my wife and I said, "Alice, where are you?" And she said, "I'm in San Francisco. I can't get to Los Angeles." I said, "Well, who's watching the house and the dogs?" And my son was there, so he was keeping the fires down and making sure everything was okay. But that was an instance where I went ahead and I used that communications means to get a hold of my wife to find out that things were okay.
So, would you say all of your communication was by phone? You never sent any letters or emails or anything?
Oh, in Desert Storm, I wrote letters. In Korea, I wrote letters to my parents, but not a whole lot. So mostly it was by telephone. Now, the other thing in Operation Iraqi Freedom, when I had that cell phone, I also had my Apple laptop computer. And I purchased at, it was about $7 a month to get Wi-Fi access from my little hooch. Hooch is a term for your kind of room.
Okay.
But then in the morning, when everybody wasn't up, I'd get up early enough because I had to be in early, that I could Skype with my wife and get a video picture of her for about 25 minutes. So we go from early on in Vietnam, where the only way to communicate to your parents or your loved ones is by letter, maybe a phone call once every 3 months or so, to by Operation Iraqi Freedom in 2007, we're communicating video, live connection on the computer.
So, when you're going back from places such as the careers, how did you return?
In Korea, in Europe, when I was stationed there, you took commercial air. Either that or the Army would have, when we went to Korea, the Army contracted with an air service called Flying Tigers. And they were primarily a cargo service, but they also did contract flights. And they would put seats in a plane, and it was like a civilian airliner. contracted airline, you fly it over. When we came back, we went commercial on Korean Air. When we went to Europe 2-3 times, and the Middle Eastern, except for the wars, you flew in on commercial airlines. You get a ticket. The government has a whole system to go buy up airline tickets and then have the tickets available for soldiers that are on official orders. When I went into Operation Iraqi Freedom, when I went into Desert Storm originally, we flew out of a charter 767 out of Fort Benning, Georgia, packed with soldiers, all armed with ammunition, flew into Cairo, and then from Cairo we hopped into Saudi Arabia, into an air base over by Dhahran on the coast, on the Gulf Coast of Saudi Arabia. And we were all armed because you didn't know what the circumstances were going to be in that 12 hours that you were in flight, because Saddam Hussein was positioned to attack south. So that was all military, all charter. When I went into Operation Iraqi Freedom, again, flew out of Fort Benning, Georgia, and happened to be going through there again. We flew a charter into Kuwait. Landed at Kuwait International Airport, which is a civilian international airport, processed through, picked up buses, and then they bus you on the Kuwaiti highway system. It's not considered the war zone. It's adjacent to the war zone, to a military encampment in which they process you in the country and they get you ready to go from that encampment to whatever location you're supposed to go to within Iraq. Then they take you down to, they have an airfield, a C-17 lands. You go on up the ramp, you sit down on the seats that they've got in the cargo hold, and then they fly you into Baghdad Airport, which is a military zone, the whole area. The airport, the Camp Victory, the other camps around that is a gigantic compound. 3 or 4 times the size of Los Angeles International Airport. It's a big area. And that's all secured by American forces and Iraqi forces. And that's essentially a safe zone except for the rockets coming through. So that's how you transport in and out of the combat zone.
So how is readjusting yourself as a civilian and in the society?
Well, I had an interesting situation because I retired from the Army in 2000 and applied for a teaching job and was teaching Army ROTC. And I taught Army ROTC for 6 years, and in 2006, with the war going on, that had been going on for 4 years, my son and daughter had already been to Iraq. I got a phone call, and the Army asked me to come back on active duty from retirement. So I left my classroom and went into Baghdad in the war for 12 months, and came back out, went back home, and then about a month later picked up teaching ROTC. For me, the transition wasn't difficult. I had not been exposed to any intense combat. I'd not been danger close to any incoming projectiles or rockets that had occurred. I had not seen anything that was of a horrific nature at the time that I was there. So I got back to Fort Benning. And I guess the one thing I wanted to do was to go ahead and get something to eat and see my wife. And she had flown in to see my daughter, who was stationed at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. And my daughter and my wife drove down to Fort Benning, where I had arranged to have rooms in the BOQ, the family lodge there at Fort Benning. So 2 days after I got back, they came on down. I processed out. We drove back up to Fort Bragg, where my daughter was living in the house that we owned there. And I kind of transitioned for about a week there with her, my wife. Went back into this area, Orange County, early December 2007. And the transition was, I transitioned in and out of places before. I had a family that was there supporting my efforts. I can't say my wife was totally happy with me going back into the Army, but she understood the motivation.
Do you think the transition into retirement this year will be hard for you?
No, not at all. I've retired before. Retired from the Army. Retired from teaching one time before, and went back to teaching. Now I'm ready to retire. I've been working for 40 years. So, that's a long, solid time doing the Army and doing the teaching of Army subjects. So it's time. And I'm looking forward to doing something else. Spending time visiting battlefields, looking at museums, and doing things that I want to do.
Over the years, have you contacted very many other veterans?
Well, I've talked to a lot of veterans all the time, both in my service in the Army and as an ROTC instructor. I belong to several veterans organizations. I don't have a whole lot of time for them, but I will have a little more time for them when I retire. The VFW, the American Legion, we go to the Legion Hall, there's veterans there all the time. After I retired from the Army, I served with the California National Guard as a state military reserve officer for 10 years and commanded units there, and there were a whole lot of veterans in that situation. A lot of my friends are veterans. Not even veterans from the same service or from the same time. But we all tend to have similar experiences and an understanding of what we did and why we did. That's another piece of when people talk about veterans. It's not just that we had similar experiences, but we had similar motivations, reasons why we went to places we went to, separated from families, not in combat.
Do you think any wartime experiences affect you in certain ways?
They always do. They will affect you in one way or another, either in the comparisons of your particular lifestyle, your systems, your beliefs, in the idea of having seen things that other people haven't seen or experienced, a greater understanding of why there are good things and bad things in the world, including people. But it hasn't affected me in the sense that you see on television all the time or in the media that, these people all have PTSD and are running around with their hair on fire because they can't handle their particular situation. That is not happening. Then I've never been put in a situation where I had to shoot somebody or where somebody was shooting at me. Being in the combat zone and being in direct combat are two different situations. My daughter's been shot at. Didn't affect her too hard. My son's been in a more close to combat. He hadn't been in actual combat. Either my son-in-law's been shot at. They were in situations that they were conflict. I have, but it has not affected either of them either. My daughter's still as mean as she ever was. I don't perceive that I've had any real significant injustice.
Were there any major life lessons, do you think, you could bring back from military service?
Oh, lots and lots of life lessons. It would take me a while to go ahead and think through tolerance, dealing with people, how to deal with people. Because what a lot of people don't understand is in the Army at any rate, we have to deal with people. Because our main instrument of combat are soldiers. In the Navy, the main instrument of combat is some machinery run by sailors, but it's the machinery that is your main weapon system. And each individual there is just another part of that machinery. In the Army, the machinery is the soldier. And the biggest machine we have is, a tank with 5 guys in it. So, how to deal with people, how to focus, how to establish goals and achieve them. All those things are critical elements of living within the military and ensuring that you don't fail. Because think about what happens if the American military fails. What happens? Yeah, you're all in danger. So you cannot afford to fail because that puts the nation at risk. So those things, how to be tolerant of people, how to assess yourself because we all are going to be failures at some point in time, in some way. In dealing with other people, everything doesn't always go well. And who do you blame if something goes wrong? Most people don't. Most people blame the other person. If something goes wrong with us, it's your fault, it ain't my fault. That's a life lesson. To be able to introspect in relations with other people and determine where you are wrong and where they may be right. To go ahead and analyze your situation. It took me a long time to realize that everything that went bad in my life was not my wife's fault. Okay? A lot of it was my fault, and I had to go ahead and take ownership of what I had done to make a difficult situation worse. So those are some things that the Army will teach you, the military will teach you that. You have to introspect, you have to think things through. Because teamwork is a major element of what we do. You've got to work with them.
So, what would you tell us to what's so great about it?
Well, there are a lot of things that are advantageous to be in the military. One is travel. I mean, I have lived in 7 different countries. I've visited about 30 different places. I've traveled all over the world. I've seen things that you see on the movies that I've walked through. And I didn't pay for any of that. The government sent me there. I went because it was part of a job that I was doing. And while there, had the opportunity to see things, to go places, to meet people. So travel is one plus to being in it. Education. The military helped me with my education. I went to the University of Southern California on a military scholarship. That's why I went to USC. Because if they were going to go ahead and get 5 years of my life, they were going to pay for it. And then I liked what I was doing. I liked the military. To wake up every day with a sense of purpose, with a reason to go through that day, to be people and be successful, is a gift that keeps you focused and living every day. You don't go to a job you don't like and wonder why you are doing this. You know why you're there. You're there for a purpose, to defend the nation, to lead soldiers in defending the nation, to make their life tolerable and worthwhile. That is probably central to what you want to do. You want to lead, you want to have a purposeful life, you want to make sense of what you are doing in this world. That's a good reason to go ahead and do it. Just to be in service. Give you that same sense. And my attitude was, as long as I like what I'm doing, I'm going to stay with it. I finally got to a point that I wasn't doing anything of any significance. It's time to retire. There are other advantages. Your pay is not great, but it's sustainable. It gives you a good lifestyle. And it allows you to continue doing other things that you want to do. I like old cars. I collect them, restore them. And the military, while it was a lot of hard work, gave me a opportunity to do that. So those type of things are reasons to join the military. Education, there's continuing education. I got my master's degree when I was 6 years. Paid for by the GM. You're all looking at going to college, right? How are you going to pay for it? There's a tough one. Yeah, well, the military's there, capable of helping you pay for that college tuition. You can join the Army Reserve or the National Guard. And you serve on your weekends and a couple of weeks during the year, and you get paid. It's about $500 a month, but that's money coming in. Then you qualify for the GI Bill. The GI Bill is going to pay you money to go to school. That's how my son got through college. My daughter got through college on an Army scholarship. I didn't have to pay anything for the two of them to go to school. So all the money we saved up in school, my wife and I spent on going on cruises. So that's it. You can apply for an ROTC scholarship, and that'll pay your way through a college education. My daughter did. You could join the military after high school, go to the education centers, get an education, probably the first 2 years, tuition free, pay for that. Now, it's hard to coordinate that because you're serving and you've got to do it at night, on weekends, sometimes when you're not working. And then you get the GI Bill, get out and finish your education.
Can you tell us about your badges?
The badges that I'm wearing are of several different categories and classifications. The ribbons indicate specific achievements, mostly for service, something that I did well in a position, or they indicate service, where I've got one that says that I was serving in Korea after the Korean War during the armistice period of time, which is still going on. There's another one that says I served with the United Nations, the little blue one down here, UN. That's UN. I was in Bosnia for peacekeeping operations with NATO. That's the NATO Bosnian. When I was in Desert Storm, both Saudi Arabia and Kuwait gave service members a campaign ribbon or medal for having served there, and that's what these two are down here. That is, that's the War on Terrorism. That's Operation Iraqi Freedom. So somebody who knows military service will know that I've been to Operation Iraqi Freedom. This is Desert Storm. So, and 2 stars because I had 2 campaign credits there. I was there for the attack and I was there for the surrender. So you get 2 credits for that. All this on top are specific achievements for things that I did individually in my service. And I've got a statement that says what I did and all the great things that I've done. Then the badges these are badges for qualification. I'm a paratrooper and a jump master, which means that I can control the inside of the airplane with the flying to go do a parachute jump. The star means that I have over 65 jumps. The one below that are air assault wings, which means that you can go ahead and conduct combat assaults out of a helicopter. Down below is the Department of the Army Staff Badge. That means that I served on the headquarters staff in the Pentagon for at least 1 year. And then this is a combat badge. That's for Operation Iraqi Freedom. That's the unit I served with. So you wear that in your pocket. And then I've got the unit awards. Everybody that was in the unit at the same time received these because the whole unit did something good. And then these are Belgian jump wings. The Belgians jump out of the pool. So if you jump with them twice, you qualify for the jump, which I did. So that's the compendium of what all that means. And somebody who is aware of the awards and decorations would understand. I've been to certain places. The first time, you're not thinking about it because you don't know what you're going through and you just follow the guy in front of you. Second time is a little worrisome. Because now you've done it once and you know that something can go wrong. Sometimes there's a little bit of hesitation and worry. After about 20 jumps, you get into the routine of it and it's just fun. You just keep doing it, like it. You don't really feel, if you are in a high-performance aircraft, a propeller-driven or jet-driven aircraft, a transport like a C-141 or a C-130, the plane is going at 120 knots when you exit. Well, that's like 135 miles an hour. When you step out the door, you don't fall down. You kind of go sideways. So you step out the door and you're going like this, and you're kind of on your back. And then your chute opens and you slowly transition into a fall. But by that time, the fall is broken by the presence of the chute. The one that was the problem was 2 jumps I made out of a helicopter, which was a CH-54, which was so slow that you stepped off and you fell down. I mean, you just fell straight down before your chute opened. And out of the balloon, the same thing. The balloon's not moving forward. You step off and it's like falling off the roof. You just go straight down into your parachute. So that was a little disconcerting. Because now you feel the fall.
In Belgium, do they actually use that in military operations? Or is that just training?
No, it's just training only. Yeah, just training. So they don't have to spend the money for the fuel and the flight time and the maintenance on an aircraft. They just put you up in a balloon and let you jump.
What would you say is your best experience in the military overall your years?
Best experience? I think I would say being the executive officer for the 112 Signal Battalion at Fort Bragg. I was jumping. It was special operations. We worked with the Green Berets, supported them, and that was our mission. It was at a place I like. I worked with outstanding people. I had a position of responsibility in the organization that could make or break the organization as the executive officer. We did preparation for the invasion of Panama, so there was a sense of purpose for a real-world mission there. So that comes to mind. There were several others that were similar to that. That's probably one of the best times I had. Yeah, sure. If you want to go ahead and look at some of these, this would be my earlier career here. That's not my earlier career, but that is California National Guard. Schwarzenegger was the governor, and he came on down and visited our unit. So, but this is my graduation of that basic course. You asked me, what did you do after college? This is the first thing you do, and this is the guys in my basic course. You know the uniforms are completely different. That's great. Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Is this still recording?
Yeah, you guys will edit it, right?
Yeah, we'll edit it.
You guys have an editing facility in school, or you do it at home?
We'll just do it at home.
Yeah. I don't have the editing facilities at school, but I can.
My dad was in television, so I know all about film editing and tape editing. Of course, now you're
let's go over
editing
the other side.
digitally.
I got this. Alright, go over the other side because the picture's going to come back.
It's hard to learn, but once you learn, it's fun.
Yeah. Yeah, you create something.
That's good right there.
So in the military, if your wife doesn't work, she can volunteer. And my wife, we've been married just a couple of months. She volunteered and she worked with the Army Emergency Relief on post. And this was the general's wife, so she's getting her certificate. Korea. Some of our communication sites, laying cable in Korea. This is the orphanage that we supported. So a bunch of kids living in the orphanage, and we would go get them food and truck the food up so they could make their kimchi, which is a Korean way of preserving vegetables. Are you Korean? Are you Chinese?
But I've
Kimchi. Yeah. You have winter kimchi or summer kimchi?
not sure what's the difference.
You probably have summer kimchi. That's the stuff you can eat. The winter kimchi has been fermented for like 5 months.
Oh.
Yeah, so it's my headquarters building. That was my office. This was the officers club. So there was an officers club there. You could go to and have dinner, and there was a bar, and you could drink, and they had entertainment, dancing girls, and bands, and you could dance. One of the military balls my wife and I went to. More pictures of people I worked with. Oh, these are the people my wife worked with. She got a job with the staff section, and she was working in the military. Let's go through this. This is Fort Bragg with the 82nd Airborne Division. Those are some of my troops. That's back in the late 1970s. You have to have a military photograph every year. So you go get your photograph taken so they put it in your record. This is a drop zone in Fort Bragg, parachute operations. This is out in front of my house. I went and bought a little refugee. Pass and review. On this pass and review, this is a divisional pass and review. So as you look down here, you probably won't see it in the camera, but every unit in the 82nd Airborne Division is lined up on a mile-long field, and there are 11,000 troops. And then each unit in mass marches past the reviews. So I did that for 2 years. My guy's operating out in the field, putting up an antenna. And then these are just letters and things from my time at Fort Bragg. More passing reviews for change of command. My command photograph when I commanded Alpha Company of the 25th Signal Battalion at Fort Bragg. And change of command. They're a little out of focus. I went to the Marine Corps Comm School. Those are my school mates there. And then I was assigned to the U.S. Navy for 2 years. So I was out at sea, and these are some pictures of my sea duty. I was a communicator for the Navy at that time. So that's the ship I was on. You did serve with the Navy before you went to Europe? No, I was an Army guy serving with the Navy. They're called liaison officers. So if the Navy has to carry Army guys instead of Marines, there's a group of us in the Army trained to do that operation. So we can facilitate all of the communications, all of the operations that goes on. So that's what I did for 2 years. From there I went to the FAO course. At the time, the Army decided that everybody had to have a secondary specialty. My primary specialty was communications. My secondary was a foreign area officer for the Middle East. So I trained and spent time learning about the Middle East and the cultures, and I worked for the UN for a year as my in-country tour to learn about the culture and the different people. And this is my son and daughter and my wife in Jerusalem. Now, she's the major in the Army, and he's the captain. So this is an old picture. Okay? Here we are in the UN, a couple of Canadian officers. I'm up at one of the UN outposts. My UN information there. In the UN it was unique because we worked with Soviets. So these are all, a bunch of these are Soviet officers. They were our enemies during the period of time we were UN. So that's the UN. This was the commander of the office, and he's a Russian lieutenant colonel. These are all Russians, except for Debbie. And when we were in, that's not mine, unless it turned on accidentally. Yeah, good. What the heck is that doing?
What's the song?
That's the Bossa Nova. You never heard the Bossa Nova? There we go. No, that's not what it is.
Okay.
Unless they hit a button somewhere. When we were in the Middle East, my parents thought that we were in Israel. The invasion had gone on in Lebanon. There was terrorist activities going on all over. There was war everywhere. And they thought that I was in imminent danger. This is what we were actually doing. Beach parties. Because the Mediterranean is right here. And this was the apartment building that most of the UN guys lived in. And we were partying down at the pool. And then we were partying down at the Mac House. This is me and another American officer dressed up in Arab garb getting ready to go to a party. So we let our beards grow out and we put on our stuff. I said we had continuing education. This is Command and General Staff College. So as a mid-level officer, you go through another series of education to teach you how to deal strategically with major world problems, how to command at levels of battalion, brigade, and division. So that's at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. Special Operations Command. We're all a bunch of paratroopers looking at new communications gear. This is all Special Operations Command. My promotion in the Pentagon. So I was working for a general officer there, and he pinned me. These are the orders to Saudi Arabia. This is where we went into Desert Storm. They had about 1,000 people living in that gym on cots. And you would report there, and then they would go ahead and give you an assignment, and you would catch a vehicle and have it out where you're supposed to go. Out at one of the encampments, that's what it looked like. just tents out in the desert. This was the compound that we were working out of, called Escon Village. It was not a difficult experience. They're lining up, getting ready to go into the combat, and convoys moving down the road. And I was selected for promotion to lieutenant colonel, and this was a letter from my boss at that time. And there's my promotion to lieutenant colonel. General Gray and my wife pinning on my more letters, congratulatory letters for all of that stuff. This is going into command at Belgium. I commanded the 39th Signal Battalion for SHAPE headquarters, which is the NATO headquarters in Europe. And I had the American Signal Battalion. I had about 300 soldiers that I commanded all over the northern part of Belgium and Holland. And I had some in Germany and one big detachment in the middle of England. So this is all of my soldiers. Some of the events we went to, my S3, he was my operations officer. Some of my soldiers getting ready for a dining in, which is a party. This was an interesting event because we were the only American battalion in Belgium, and we were asked to be the guest battalion at the 50th anniversary of the Battle of the Bulge. So this is in Bastogne, where the 101st Airborne Division held out against the Germans for 11 days. And we are lined up here, and there's a Belgian detachment and an American band. This is my unit at what they call the Martyson Monument, which was a monument to all of those who had fought at Bastogne. And then they went into we went to present arms, attention, present arms, and they had a Catholic communion service. So we were standing there for about 35 minutes, salute, just standing still. I lost a couple of soldiers who went down. And then we marched through the parade. So the soldiers getting ready. They didn't want to go by the time the whole thing was over with, and they understood the importance of what they had done. They couldn't wait to do it again. Here we are marching through the center of Bastogne. And they hadn't seen an American battalion in 50 years. So it was a real event for the Belgian people. My soldiers went into the bars around there, and they were not allowed to pay for a drink. They went in, and anything they wanted was paid for. So they had a really good time. This is out at a place called Verdun. Have you guys talked about Verdun yet? No. In the battlefields around Verdun, it is estimated that within 10 months, in an area probably the size of Newport Beach, 900,000 people died in battle. And this is almost 90 years after the battle. Those are shell craters. Okay, these are all shell craters. This is all crater. The 9 villages that stood in this area, there's not a trace of them. They were pounded into dust, never rebuilt. And if you go out there and you start walking around in the forest, you're liable to step on live ordnance and kill yourself. These are, again, you can see the shell holes full of water, what the battlefield looks like. And it is a battlefield of concrete forts as well. This is the backside of one of the concrete forts that's underground. Turrets pop up, turrets that can traverse and fire upon the enemy. The trench of the bayonets. In the first few days of the war, an entire French company disappeared. And they never had a trace of them. And for 3 years, they didn't know what had happened until somebody was out cleaning up the battlefield and tripped. And he went back where he had tripped, and there was that much of a bayonet sticking out of the ground. A little teeny needle tip of a bayonet. And he went on and he found another one, another one, another one. And when they excavated the first few that they found a French soldier under each one of those bayonets, with his bayonet up, getting ready to go. Evidently, a shell had hit and buried the entire company lined up in the trench. So this is the monument. They're still there. This was our German battalion that was a sister battalion, and we were there for their ceremony of graduation for their new recruits. So my unit went out. That's where we got our German Schützenspurs, which I don't wear because American officers are not allowed. German officers aren't allowed to wear it, so American officers can't wear it. So, but it is a German shooting badge. This is in Belgium again. He is my logistics officer, my S4, my supply officer. He's a civilian, but we hired him. And amazingly enough, 25 years afterwards, his daughter and my son are dating now.
That's good.
They went to high school together, and for years later, they didn't see each other. Again, this is Belgium. I took my battalion out to Normandy. This is Utah Beach, where they landed on D-Day. This is Omaha Beach, looking down Point de Hoc, where the Rangers climbed up the mountain. And this is down to the beaches where the 29th Division landed. We were out doing tactical exercises to try and experience what they would have experienced moving off of the beaches. German gun positions. This was a British beach they set up. Have you ever heard of the mulberries, the mobile harbors that they put into Normandy so that there was no port anywhere near we landed? So they created mobile harbors that they floated across, and they developed a whole harbor with piers and breakwaters. And this is what remains of that. German gun positions, the guns are still there.
They're like concrete.
Yeah, the concrete buried underground. This is what remains 70 years later of the harbor. Caissons are still sitting out there about a mile off. More of the battlefield. This is the American Cemetery above Normandy. We visited there, took pictures, put a wreath down. Again, more of the cemetery. This is the cemetery in Luxembourg. That's George Patton's grave. So General Patton was buried in Luxembourg. If you don't know much about General Patton, watch the movie Patton. I'm going to explain to you who he was. This is the wife of my logistics officer, the mother of my son's girlfriend, and she's got to do everything I do, so she's open her cigar. This is a picture of my soldiers that worked at what was at the time a classified communication site in the middle of England, because it was an NSA site, so they were listening, and we were providing the data link for them to send out all their stuff. My daughter, my son in ROTC, my wife, we're going to a military ball. More pictures of people you talked about veterans. He's a veteran. I knew him through the Boy Scouts. He was one of the first Americans into Paris when it was liberated in 1944. So he drove in, and he told me one time, he said, "You ever been to the Louvre?" I said, "Yeah." If you look at the Louvre from the side of the Quai, I forget what it's called, you look up at the second floor, you'll see bullet holes. Those are my bullet holes. They were shooting us. He just shot the building up. Change of command. When you have a change of command, they have a program, invitations. So I just have representative of that particular experience. I'm giving up command. I've done my 2 years. Now I'm moving on to another assignment. Somebody else is taking control. And these are my French counterpart was there. My logistics officer. This is my automation officer. Being communications, we have a whole lot of automation servers. Internet connections that we were responsible for. Again, more change of command. Everybody says something. And that's the change of command for my boss in my next assignment, and I had to run that. So we had 1,000 soldiers on the field. There's the soldiers, the change of command. I was the commander of troops. So I gave all the commands. I was working with some Eastern European officers here. They were looking at our communications capabilities in my office. We went into Bosnia at that time. We had peacekeeping duties there because Yugoslavia fell apart and they were fighting each other. And President Clinton arranged for a ceasefire, and we went in to go ahead and control the ceasefire. So this is Zagreb, where headquarters was, And the people in Croatia were upset with the UN, and what they would do is they would build this wall around UN headquarters with a brick with the name of every Croatian that was being killed in this civil war that was going on. This is where I live. This is the area of our compound. It was a wrecked Croatian air base that we were using. And you can see some of the areas that we were working in. It was cold, there was snow on the ground. It was not a rough existence. There was no drinking. There were no wives, no family. And we were working 12, 14 hours a day. Our job was to put in communications to support those people who were the peacekeepers that were on the front lines to keep the two sides from shooting each other. This was our headquarters area. We were in an old hospital, keeping track of the lines. My primary job at this time was not to go ahead and do communications in the forward area in Croatia. My job was to run all the communications back in Germany. So I had the rear detachment, and half the communications that were being deployed at the time was under my control. So but I had to go out there every month to go see how things were going. Pictures of the soldiers that are working, where we're at, setting stuff up, putting satellite equipment in. This is a satellite dish. Set it up so that we can go ahead and activate the bird. More guys in Bosnia. At the time, it was one of the few wars that was going on. So everybody wants to get in on it. Let me explain, in a sense you might be able to understand a soldier's view of war. It's like a fireman's view of fire. We train to stop something that is catastrophic, like a fireman trains to stop a fire. But when the fire starts, there's no place a fireman wants to be more than at the fire to do what he's supposed to do. The same thing with a soldier. If there's going to be a war, I've trained for this war, I want to go, because that's what I am here for. I don't want to sit back and watch everybody else go. So that's the sense of when war occurs, why soldiers end up saying, hey, I want to go. It's because of what they're trained for, to stop that event from happening. This is the Sarajevo International Airport. It was blowing to crap. There were snipers all around, and you had to be very careful there because you might get a shot going out to your airplane. This was our airplane that we were leaving on. This is what it looks like. Everything was blown up. This was an Olympic village just about 7 years before. And now it's just absolutely destroyed. This is the Olympic ice skating rink. This is what it looks like now. They've just blown the hell out of it. There was not a single building in all of Sarajevo that had not been hit by shell fire. Everything was. And this was an old hotel we were staying in. We got a Bradley out front to go ahead and guard the entrance. This was a big hotel. I felt like I was in Mad Max living in that place. Just a real wreck. This here is not only significant because it's in Sarajevo. That's the bridge that Archduke Ferdinand drove over and was assassinated right here. That starts World War I. So that's where this is.
This is all still in Belgium, or?
No, this is down in former Yugoslavia. This is down in Yugoslavia. Croatia, Bosnia, Serbia are all the former Yugoslavia down in the Mediterranean. And when Tito died, Yugoslavia fell apart, and they had a civil war going on because the three peoples didn't like each other. They didn't want to be a part of each other, but they wanted everybody else's territory. So they had this civil war going on. And we went down to stop it. Again, buildings, everything's falling apart. This was a huge building that they just blew up. And they blew up the building while people were still in it. So huge catastrophic casualties going on. And this is my command here in Southern California. I commanded the recruiting battalion. So if you talk to any Army recruiters, that was my job after I got back from Europe. We were recruiters. This is my recruiters and my change of command when I took over. The events that we did. We had the Army van. I think it went to Mission Viejo High School. I think we had it down to. When I went down to Corona Del Mar High School, they weren't really interested in talking to us because all of you are going to college. You know, our students aren't going into the Army; they're going to college. Yeah, that's what I did. I went to college and then I went into the Army. So these are all of my recruiters. And my wife talking to them. Very, very. Then my last assignment was with 35th Signal Brigade, Halloween. Everybody got to be crazy. This is a jump master check. We're getting ready for a jump, and I'm checking to make sure that this soldier has everything put together properly so he doesn't have a problem. That's one of the responsibilities as a jump master. Getting ready for the jump, I'm all rigged up. We're waiting for the plane to come in. We're out on an airfield, out at the drop zone. Plane comes in, you load up. That's me, that's one of the lieutenants. And then we're dropping. My wife took this picture. I'm somewhere in that group right there. Out on the range. This is the last parachute jump I made was into the battlefield at Gettysburg. So we jumped into the Gettysburg battlefield and then we did what we call a staff ride, where we tour the battlefield with a military point of view to look at the strategy and the events that occurred on the battlefield. And I've staff rided Gettysburg and Chickamauga. I've been out to Waterloo. I lived close to Waterloo, so I went there. You studied Waterloo?
How Napoleon lost his battle there.
Well, let me tell you, there are a couple of things that you have to take a look at the terrain. And then this is the very last bit. I went and visited my son at his basic training. So that's my son in the Army, and that's my daughter. I went and visited her at her basic course as she's getting commissioned. And then that's the end of my career, guys. Waterloo. Let me tell you something on Waterloo. Napoleon made a couple of real critical mistakes. Not all of them were his. For instance, Grouchy did not keep, who was it? I want to say it's Blucher. Yeah, it was Blucher from the battlefield. He was supposed to do that so that the Germans didn't get to Waterloo. The Germans get to Waterloo, then the Allies outnumber the French. But if you stand from Napoleon's point of view at the Belle Alliance, which is where his headquarters was, and you look at the battlefield, it looks like it is a relatively smooth, flat battlefield. If you go to Wellington's side, where the British were, you look and you stand, and what you do is you see the fold in the battlefield. There's a fold in the battlefield that you can't see from Napoleon's side, in which you lose track of what's down in there. That's why Napoleon's cavalry was defeated in their charge. They were lost. That's why his artillery impacted in that fold and never got to, in most cases, the British line. The ground was very, very wet, and the cannonballs didn't bounce. They were absorbed. The other thing you notice from Wellington's side is you're on a height, that the ground is actually falling away to where Napoleon is. And you're standing on a ridge, and down back behind you, Napoleon can't see what's there. And that's where Wellington kept most of his troops. And then Ney got absolutely caught with trying to take the Eagle, which was this farm. And he threw everything in there rather than trying to go ahead and break the British line. It was you go out there, it is a great battlefield. You see the whole battlefield in a day. Gettysburg takes a couple of days. I've been to Normandy, I've been to the Battle of the Bulge, I've been to Verdun, so I did a lot of battlefield touring. That's what I'm going to do when I retire, more battlefield touring. That's cool. You guys have any other questions? Okay.
Thank you so much
Well,
for coming.
communicate with me, when you have your luncheon.
Yeah.
And if there's anything else I can do for you gentlemen,